I'm N.J. Lindquist, and I am the publisher and co-editor of this book, Hot Apple Cider, which is the first book in the Hot Apple Cider series. I want to mention two other people that have been involved with the book all the way along. The first of them is my husband, Les, who is a publisher with me. Our company is called That's Life Communications. And the second person, you can see the name here, is Wendy Elaine Nellis, who was the co-editor with me. In addition, we had 30 writers who contributed to the book. And I want to just read the tagline here, the bottom part of our title. It's words to stir the heart and warm the soul. And we didn't exactly set out to do this, but after we had the book together, we realized this is a book about faith. This is a book about the fact that things go wrong all the time, and many people blame God, but in reality, if you turn to God instead of blaming Him, you find that there is a way. You may not always have everything turn out the way you want, but there will be something new happen. And what these stories and poems do is basically share stories, true stories, and stories based on truth about what has happened in these people's lives and what they want you to know, what could happen in your life as well. I would love to read you the entire book, but I can't because there are just too many pieces in it, so I've chosen a few. You will get just a little taste of what the book is about. And I'm going to read you some excerpts from Hot Apple Cider. And the first excerpt is actually something that I wrote. And it's called The Diamond Ring. And actually, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is the ring that the story is about. And it is a true story. The other guests at the birthday party appeared to be having a wonderful time. I was counting the minutes until I could go home and read a book, or design more clothes for my paper dolls. As soon as we'd eaten the birthday cake, I said I had to leave. Dressed in my best party dress and wearing my white sandals, carrying a little basket of candy and trinkets, I fought to hold back the tears that started the moment I closed the door. Our house was on the outskirts of town, and to reach it I had to cross a set of railway tracks. I stopped and walked along the rails. By now I was sobbing in earnest, and I didn't want my parents to see, didn't want them to worry. I also was trying to figure out why I wasn't like other people. For a moment I thought it might be a huge relief if a train would come along and erase the pain. It was 1955, and I was 7 years old. I had 2 loving parents, a dog and a cat, a nice home, no worries about getting enough food, no fear of being abused in any way. I was a child who apparently had everything a child might want, and yet loneliness was my constant companion. Romance Amid Reality, another true story, by Sheila Ray Gregoire. Every Valentine's Day, many of us are plagued with questions in the romance department. Will he send flowers? Will she say yes? My question last year was a bit different. Why can't he ever bang up his car? I would feel significantly better about myself if just every now and then my husband would back into a tree, or rear-end the car in front of him, or hit a fire hydrant. I've done all of those things. I've actually hit a fire hydrant twice, and I don't see why I should be the only one. The latest accident happened a few weeks ago when the roads were really icy. I was only going about 20 kilometers an hour when the truck ahead of me stopped. I had plenty of room, but I hit an icy patch and just couldn't get the brakes to respond. My front bumper hit his trailer hitch. Guess who won? In retrospect, I can't see anything I could have done differently. It was just one of those things. But here's my problem. If it truly wasn't my fault, then why aren't all our accidents divided equally between the two of us? Why is it only ever me? What Was God Thinking? By Brad Burke, M.D. Again, a true story. I stood motionless by her gravesite, asking the inescapable question, why? When life hurts, helplessness often takes over the helm, and routine and pleasure jump ship. The loss of a beloved child, a soulmate, a sacrificing parent, or an endeared grandparent abruptly halts the mellow voyage of life, transforming the shimmering waves of happiness into towering waves of sorrow. Nothing we do, nothing we say, nothing we possess can bring our loved one back. Memories both comfort and pain us. Questions both flee and haunt us. Answers both calm and anger us. As I stood by my grandmother's gravesite, staring blankly at her suspended coffin, tears sliding down my cheeks, the question why was grinding through my head. Toward the end of her life, my grandmother's final dream was to hold in her arms her first great-grandchild. When my sister became pregnant for the first time, you can imagine how excited my grandmother became. She knew that her dream would be realized in a matter of months. But less than 2 weeks before my sister gave birth to her first baby boy, Joshua, my grandmother, at the age of 72, died of cancer. She was my last living grandparent, and there was nothing she wouldn't do for me. But in the end, I couldn't even be there for her. I was isolated 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, working day and night in my medical residency. Broken Bodies, Shattered Lives. A True Story by Paul M. Beckingham. I don't remember the split seconds before the impact, not the angry skid of tires, nor the fearful shrieks from my wife Mary, our son Aaron, and his young Kenyan friend Daniel, not even the smashing of glass and the ripping of metal as the car crumpled on top of me. But Mary remembers it all, clearly. It is burned into her consciousness, the memory of our spinning car smashing against the side of the military semi-trailer that struck us, spins in her mind like a nightmare smashing against the pattern of our lives. Our car came to an abrupt halt at the edge of a sudden drop, and so did normal family life. The predictable rhythms of our lives were put on hold. Mary's feelings stopped at the same moment. She went into automatic pilot, into rescue mode, busying herself with arranging for family life to continue as best it might without a husband and father. For 5 days, my family waited for me to die in the Aga Khan Hospital in Nairobi, Kenya. I had broken or displaced 14 bones, fractured my skull, suffered a brain injury, and had to have my foot saved by the skill of microsurgeons. I frequently mistook Mary for my daughter Hannah. I kept telling her, "You know, I have been in a very serious car accident." Each time she would reply softly, "So have I." Where Have All the Mothers Gone? Nonfiction. By Thomas Froese and Jean Chamberlain Froese, M.D. For men, there really is no knowing what motherhood is all about. My own mother died when I was a boy. My wife Jean, however, is an obstetrician who has delivered too many hundreds of babies to count. Awed and a little fearful, I've twice watched Jean labor in childbirth. And as a journalist who has lived in the developing world for 7 years, I've had some experiences that only add to those feelings, especially the fear. Once, while Jean and I lived in Yemen, an impoverished Arab nation where women have incredibly a 1 in 8 chance of dying in childbirth, I talked with young Ramsey, a bright and caring enough newspaper office colleague whose wife was about to deliver. "When are you leaving to be with your wife?" I asked. "After the delivery," he said. He was 3 hours away from his pregnant wife. She was a week overdue and having complications. Concerned, Jean offered to help with an induction or C-section if needed. Ramsey assured us that his wife, Wadad, had a doctor. Besides, he said, "It's better if she delivers naturally, isn't it?" "No, it's better not to risk her life and the baby's, and it's better if you're with your wife, regardless of your culture's ways." Thankfully, Yemeni medics induced Wadad and all went fine in her delivery of a baby boy. But this, I've learned, is how women in the developing world die, at the quiet hands of ignorance. Will my baby die without me? A True Story by Grace Fox. Congratulations, you have a girl, announced our midwife, Margaret Brass, after my cesarean section on Tuesday morning, March 19, 1985. But instead of allowing my husband Jean or me to see or hold the baby, she and a pediatrician whisked her to an examination table across the operating room. From where I lay, I caught a glimpse of the baby's head. It looked like a swollen melon, much too large for her wee body. Something's very wrong, I thought. At that moment, the surgeon began stitching my incision, tugging and jerking the thread. No one spoke. I cast a glance toward Margaret and the pediatrician, but saw only their backs as they huddled over our baby. Why doesn't someone tell us what's going on, I wondered. The jerking and tugging sensation escalated until I felt I'd lose my mind. I can't handle this, I cried. Put me out. Within seconds, the anesthesia put me to sleep. When I awoke an hour later, Jean was sitting beside me and stroking my cheek. We're going back to the States, he said softly. We're leaving Kathmandu as soon as possible. Why? I asked. I tried to make sense of his words through my mental fog. The baby has massive hydrocephalus, excess water on the brain, he explained. She needs a shunt in her head to drain the fluid and reduce the risk of brain damage. Doctors can't do that type of surgery here. And then he added, I'll have to take her. The airline won't allow you to travel because you've just had surgery and are considered a high medical risk. How I Found Jesus in a Drug Dealer's Apartment. A True Story by Deborah Chapon. I grew up in a good, nominally Christian home in the Boston, Massachusetts area. Although I was baptized Russian Orthodox, my parents sent me to various Protestant Sunday schools so I would learn Bible stories as part of my education. When I was 8 or 9, my mother would give me an envelope containing her $2 weekly pledge to the Congregational Church, expecting me to drop it in the collection plate. Instead, I used the money to buy Superman comics, Wise potato chips, and Almond Joy chocolate bars at the Parker drugstore, conveniently on the road home from church. Somehow the Jesus I met in Sunday school spoke to me less than the comic book hero did. By the time I reached my early 20s, I had rejected the Christian faith altogether. However, spiritual things fascinated me, so I embraced Eastern religions, New Age teachings, and the occult. I even dabbled in magic because I thought it was harmless. I viewed spiritual forces as impersonal powers, like electricity. Though my lifestyle left me depressed and without self-respect, I failed to see the connection. Instead, I took foolish chances, jeopardizing my emotional and physical safety. One September night in 1973, I hitchhiked to a seedy bar in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The bartender, a large ex-con named Frank, invited me into a back room to snort cocaine. By closing time, high on the drug, I felt like Superwoman. No way did I want to go home to my lonely apartment on the other side of Harvard Square. So Frank invited me to accompany him on his drug-selling rounds. At each hippie-style apartment, we snorted lines of white powder through a rolled dollar bill. Shared Tears, a poem by Brian Austin. When wounds are deeper than words can heal, when you've plumbed the pit of pain, when you can't imagine the day will come that you might smile again, when you hurt with a bottomless depth of hurt, more than you believed you could endure, and it seems that life has nothing left and death's the only cure, then let me cry with you a while, share aching, silent tears, lean on me, accept a hug, let me bear some of your fears. I can't undo the hurt you feel or take away your pain. I can't bring back what you have lost or make you whole again. But if I'm wise enough to hold my tongue and only share my tears, 'twill be a greater gift than wondrous words with wisdom of the years. The Stuck-Filled Cafe, a short story based on truth by Bonnie Grove. The town has a real name, but I call it Stuckville because boy, oh boy, I'm stuck here. Plunked down in the middle of nothing to write home about by a husband who wanted a change, so we moved here, then wanted a bigger change, so he left me. Now I'm the sole proprietor of one rinky-dink cafe right across the street from the train tracks. I sell ice cream, espresso drinks, and Mexican food. I know the combination sounds cockeyed, but most everything about this town is cockeyed. Gene's a regular. When I say regular, I mean a constant presence. He's old like dirt, or so he says. One day he says, "Carol, I'm old." Me, diplomatic and tactful like I am, I say something like, "Oh, Gene, you're only as old as you feel," or some such gabber. He looks me square on and says, "Woman, I'm as old as dirt." And he pounds his cane on the floor. Now, I'm not old, but I've been around long enough to know that when an old man calls you woman and bangs things on the floor, it's best just to smile and nod. One morning, he says to me, "What kind of God lets an old man get cancer?" I say, "The same one that lets you get as old as dirt." Gene grumbles, but I see a smile pull at the corner of his mouth. He says, "Who says there's a God? You can't see him. You can't know him." And that's just a little taste of what is in the book Hot Apple Cider. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to mention that there is also a discussion guide so that this book could be used as part of a book club or a small group. And there's a free reading guide which you can access on the website as well. And I hope you get a copy of the book, and you might want to get a second copy to give to someone else. Thanks for your time.